Hello friend, welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to share with you a very beginner-friendly tutorial for hand embroidery. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make 8 different mini florals. So let's jump right in. But before I do, I wanted to let you know that these are floral patterns that I have drawn myself, and then I printed them out on stick and stitch paper. So I will link the supplies that I'm using below, and I also will link this template if you wanted to print this one out for yourself and make the florals that you will see in this video. Alright, so let's get started. The first floral you see has these 3 different flowers and 3 different stems that kind of meet up together. So I am going to be starting this one by using a very simple lazy daisy stitch. I think with each of these I am using 3 strands of the DMC thread, so I'm not using like the full strand. I'm taking it apart and getting 2 uses out of 1 piece of thread. So if you do use more, yours might look a little bit different, but for this I'm using 3, and I'm just doing that simple lazy daisy stitch around these florals before I go back and add the center. Once I'm done with the petals, I'm going to go back and add the center by making a French knot. Again, I'm using 3 strands, and then I am just wrapping it around 2 times to get this size of a French knot. And once I'm done with that, I am going to start with a stem stitch, and I'm just going to take that down my stem. I'm making these pretty wide, but you could do them smaller if you'd like. And then I'm going to go back and fill in the petals by using a simple leaf stitch. The size of your leaves is kind of up to you. I kind of just keep adding until I like the way that it looks. So if I want them to be more narrow, I won't add as many stitches, and if I want them to be a little fuller at the bottom, I'll keep going. So you can do that just to your personal preference, and so that might look a little bit different if you prefer them to be a little fuller or a little more narrow. That's up to you. And so here we have it. I love this one. I have used these florals for little things like napkins, hair bows, and even socks, and so I just think they're so cute. And I love that they're a quick project that doesn't take too much time. Alright, so the next flower that we're going to do, or I should say little flower bundle, I'm going to be using a lazy daisy stitch for this as well, but I'm just doing 3 of them for the 3 different petals, and I'm not pulling them super tight. You can kind of see they're a little fluffier maybe than the one that I did previously. And once the petals are done, I'm going to go ahead and fill in the stems by using that stem stitch again. So the stems and leaves of this little floral bundle are going to be very similar to the first one that I did, but then I'm going to come back and add a little bit more to the base of those petals. So you'll see that here in a moment. I am just going to do 1 straight stitch around kind of the base of the petals, but not too far up. But I want it to kind of cover a little bit of the bottom of those petals. And then after I do that wider one, then I'm just going to do another straight stitch across basically the stem. So it's just going to kind of taper down like you would see on an actual flower. You might think of like a carnation if you want to look up what a carnation looks like. That's kind of what this resembles to me, where you have the petals going up and then you have that little bit of green at the bottom. So again, here's the finished product, and I think they look beautiful, but they're also so simple to create. So the next one is kind of like stems with some buds on the end, or we could say berries. So I'm just going to start with these by creating like those 3 little branches using just a straight stitch. I'm just going back through the same hole as I come back. So I'm starting at the top in like the middle of the 3 stems or branches, I guess you would say. And then I'm going to the base, and then I go to the next branch, and then I am going to come back through that first hole that I made. So they're all kind of connected, and then after I finish the top, I am going to make the rest of the stem using a back stitch. You could do a stem stitch like before, but these just kind of have like a straighter look, so I thought they looked nice with a back stitch, which also comes together really quickly, which is very nice. Once I have those done, I'm going to trade out my color and come back and add the berries. And so to do that, I'm just going to create a French knot at the end of each of these. You can just go back through that hole that's at the top if you want them to, or if it's too difficult, you can just kind of do it right above where the green ends. I think for most of these, I kind of just went through the same hole, which made it really simple. But if that feels too crowded for you, you can just add them to the end as well. Again, with these French knots, I'm just wrapping it around 2 times, and I'm using 3 strands of the thread. Alright, for the next one, I'm going to create these little daisy type of flowers, and I am just using a straight stitch for each of these. So Depending on how many strands of thread you're using, these might get a little more crowded than mine are. But for this size and for the amount of thread I'm using, I'm pretty much following the lines here. But if they do get a little too crowded or too spread apart, you can always add or take away one of those lines. This is very forgiving. But I just like a guide to follow so that I know how far out to put my petals. That way it looks a little bit more uniform even if things are moved around a little bit. I like to start with the outside and then go back to the middle. But again, that's just a personal preference. And once I'm done with the petals, I'm going to come back through and fill in the center with another French knot. Now with this one, I'm still using the 3 strands of thread, but I am going around it 3 times for the French knot. So it's just a little bit bigger than the ones that you saw me do previously, but of course you could do it either way. And then once I'm done with those flowers, I'm coming back with another stem stitch until I get all of the stems done. I kind of meet them together at the bottom since it's kind of one little cluster of flowers. And then when I'm done with that, I'm going to come back and finish off my leaves with a leaf stitch. Again, with the leaves, I just kind of like to continue adding until I feel like they have the perfect fullness for the flowers that I'm creating. So I just kind of start at the top of the leaf, the top point, and go down pretty far, especially with these smaller ones. And then I'm just going to go back and forth, moving just a little bit down my guideline. And then if I feel like I need to add some more to get a little bit more fullness or a little bit more of that leaf shape, I can always add more. But like I said, you can just kind of go with your feelings on this one. All right, so the next flower that I have is this cone flower, or echinacea is kind of what it looks like to me. I am going to start out by doing just a couple of lazy daisy stitches. I have 3 strands again of my embroidery floss. If you want a reference for what these flowers kind of look like, you could look up echinacea, and you'll see they kind of stand with the middle part of the flower looking up, and then the petals kind of go down. And so when you do get to the center part of this, I've done it both ways. I either do just like one French knot for the center, or I have done a cluster of them. And if I do a cluster of them, I might only wrap them around like 1 or 2 times, but you could do it either way. It's definitely easier in my opinion just to do one French knot. So if you do one and make it a little bit bigger, it still kind of has that shape of like the center of the flower pointing up and kind of being a little bit taller. But it also looks nice to do a cluster of them as well. So it's just totally a personal preference, but I do have it kind of, the template to me looks kind of like one French knot, but like I said, you can easily do a little cluster of them as well. I'll show you, I'll insert one of the ones that I did where I had a cluster in there so you can see what the difference looks like, and just do whichever one you prefer, whichever one you like the look of better, or whichever one you just enjoy doing more. Once I have that done, again, I'm going to come back with a stem stitch for my stems and meet them kind of at the bottom, and then I'm going to come back with a leaf stitch for the leaves on the stems. Like I mentioned earlier, this is so beginner friendly. A lot of these stitches are the same, so you only need to know a handful of stitches to be able to create these. And so I hope that even if you are brand new to hand embroidery, you will feel confident when creating these floral bundles. All right, so the next flower I'm going to do is one that I'm going to do with a satin stitch. So I'm just going from top to bottom until I have filled in that template with just a basic satin stitch. You can kind of see me holding down the paper at the top a little bit. Sometimes when I push through, since the stick and stitch paper, I have it cut down pretty small. So sometimes when I'm pushing through from the bottom up, it just kind of wants to lift off the paper. So that's kind of why I'm pushing it and adding some counter pressure from the top, just to make it a little bit easier to go through. I'm so sorry if that makes my fingers be in the way, but I didn't want the paper to lift off of the fabric. So once I have my petals done with this satin stitch, you could do a French knot for the center, but I think on flowers where I've done a satin stitch on the petals, it actually looks really nice to just fill in the center circle with a satin stitch as well. I think it just lays really nicely and it looks really pretty. And so that's what I've done here. So when I'm doing the center circle with a satin stitch, I usually kind of angle the direction that I'm putting my stitches in to be just like a little bit different than the way the petals go. So I might be going up and down, kind of facing that section where the petals meet, if that makes sense, just so it doesn't go in the same direction as my petals. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. And then after I'm done with that, I'm just coming back with another stem stitch to finish off the stems, and then another leaf stitch to finish off the leaves. All right, so for this one, we're just going to start at the base of the flower and create lazy daisy stitches. This one's going to be similar to the one that I said kind of looks like a carnation, but they're a little bit smaller, and then we're not going to come back and add the green to the base of these flowers. We're just going to let these be cute little buds that might be sprouting super early in the spring. And like I said, these are pretty tiny, but I'm still using 3 strands of my thread. So you probably could use less, but 3 is kind of my standard. But I don't usually veer too far off of that unless I have a specific reason to. So once I'm done with these petals, I'm going to come back with another stem stitch and another leaf stitch. Like I said, you don't need to know a lot of stitches to make these flowers, and you can always substitute them for other stitches that you might prefer. These are just what I have found to look nice with these flowers. Alright, so the next flower that we're going to create is maybe reminiscent of lavender, which is why I use this kind of dusty purple color. But for this one, I'm just going around the edges of this template first with a French knot, and I'm wrapping my thread around 2 times for this. So I have found it easier to kind of do the edges first when I'm doing something like this with French knots, and that way I can come back and kind of fill it in. But as you are doing it, I would just kind of keep in mind how many knots you think you'll be able to fit in the middle. Sometimes when I'm creating something with a lot of French knots, if I leave kind of an awkward amount of space in the inside, then it gets kind of where they're piling on top of each other. And so for most of this, I think I'm just going to be able to fit one French knot down the center, but this might look different depending on where exactly you place your stitches. So I just kind of try to keep that in mind as I'm going through it so that I don't have a bunch of French knots like piled on top of each other. But this shape can definitely look a little bit different if you go more on the inside of the outline as well. It makes it more of a narrow flower, so just keep that in mind. One thing I did want to point out though is that I am going to remove that center part of the stem. So if you do grab this template, you won't have that center part of the stem where you can see it's kind of going in where the flower is. I tried putting the stem up that far, but it just made it difficult to add the French knots. So I am just ignoring it for the purposes of making this video, but I am going to update it before I upload that template just because I don't want that to be confusing to anybody. It wasn't a huge deal to add the stem kind of inside the flower, but it just made it more to work around. So I found it to be a little bit easier without it. So I absolutely love how these flowers turned out. I have used them for so many different things, and I just find them to be a good little size for, like I said, little details on things. But I hope that you found this helpful. Like I said, I'll link the products that I'm using in the description box below, and I will also link that printable template in the description box below if you are interested. Let me know if you have any other questions or any other hand embroidery tutorials that you want to see. I hope you are having a wonderful weekend. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next one.